Here's a topic that can get many Jamaicans fuming in just a few seconds. Why are the best jobs in Jamaica always given to foreign nationals and not the locals? Why are foreigners so successful in Jamaica? Why do they get all this royal treatment when they are hired with all the perks and bonuses, while highly qualified Jamaicans from the diaspora are never offered the same opportunities? Is the government of Jamaica trying to please big businesses, and that's why, for example, we have some construction projects done by, say, the Chinese at the expense of the locals who are qualified to do these jobs? All this is common knowledge among Jamaicans on the island and the diaspora. But have you ever tried to check any of this information, like the scale of what's happening and why it is happening? So I thought, you know what? It's time we address this, find the evidence supported with hard data, and see where they take us. Well, we're in for a lot of surprises. This video is sponsored by you. Thank you so much for the support. My name is IRIE. I am a foreign national myself that has been living in Jamaica for the last 9 years. And even though I'm a very non-typical foreigner living in Jamaica, I still have my biases as an immigrant that might influence this video. So if they do, my work is open to criticism in the comment section below, and I would really appreciate your feedback, whether you are Jamaican or foreign national. Also, a note to my subscribers. I haven't been publishing any videos lately, but in fact, for the last 2 months, I've been working on this channel more than ever, doing tons of research for several complex, challenging documentaries, and now I'm working on putting everything together, recording and editing the videos and delivering this content to you. And all of this is coming very soon, so thank you so much for your patience. I promise the upcoming videos are going to be worth the wait. Now back to the topic, and we shall start with why foreigners are so successful in Jamaica. There are 3 important points. 1. A lot of foreign nationals who come to Jamaica are actually not successful at all. They come, their expectations are not met, they struggle or they fail and go back to their home country. As a result, locals, as well as the members of the Jamaican diaspora, might get this illusion that anyone who comes to Jamaica from a different country becomes successful, gets this top-paid job, or runs a profitable business, but that's because these are the only foreigners we see. The reality is, of course, those who don't succeed in Jamaica simply leave before they can make any name for themselves, and hence we don't know about them. So we can see all the locals, including the ones who succeed and the ones who don't, whereas with foreign nationals, we only see the successful ones, hence the wrong assumption. The true part of this statement about foreigners being successful in Jamaica is that indeed, those foreigners who do stay in Jamaica are self-employed, or mostly they take high-level jobs. And here's the data to prove this. The statistics from the latest available reports based on work permits issued to labor immigrants in Jamaica. It shows that 73% of all immigrants are professionals, senior officials, and technicians. In other words, they're getting top-paid, high-level jobs. However, the reason for this is these are pretty much the only people who are eligible for a work permit in Jamaica. And this is the third important point, a very interesting one, because in many other countries, the situation with the type of employment is reversed in terms of immigrants doing the least paid jobs and usually require no skills or qualifications. In Jamaica, that's rarely the case. Have you noticed that we don't really see many foreigners working as taxi drivers or housekeepers? This is because the Jamaican government has very strict rules when it comes to protecting its labor market, especially when compared to other countries. And that's why, as a foreign national, you cannot just come to Jamaica and do any job you want. According to the law, for your work permit to be approved, the business owner first has to prove that they cannot find a local person for this job position. And that's why the majority of work permits that are issued are indeed for highly qualified and skilled persons, who of course are paid more than an unqualified worker. The legal exceptions to these rules would be foreign entrepreneurs who don't look for any jobs but create jobs in Jamaica, and they can bring their relatives or a certain number of other foreigners to work for them. And that's why you can see some clerks or shop assistants or construction workers who are not Jamaicans. They correspond to these other 27% on this chart. Of course, we're talking about legal workers. There are also illegal ones, and we'll talk about them as well. But before we move into more details about immigration in Jamaica, it's important to see how it fits into the world migration context, because the tendency in the Caribbean in general, and Jamaica in particular, is very different from the rest of the world. The definition of a migrant can vary depending on a country or organization, and can get really complicated and confusing. Here are a few definitions to read if you wish. For this video, let's make it simple and use the term migrant when referring to a person who lives outside of their country of birth at a certain point of time. For example, I was born in Ukraine, but now I live in Jamaica, so I am a migrant. If you were born in the United States and now you also live in Jamaica, you're also a migrant, even if your parents are Jamaicans. Even if you are ethnically Jamaican, still you're migrant by this definition because you were not born here. Another point to remind is that a migrant is always an immigrant and an emigrant at the same time. So in my case, I'm an immigrant for Jamaica because that's where I live now, and I'm an emigrant for Ukraine because that's the country where I was born and lived prior to coming here. Now that we have the definitions clear, how many migrants are there in the world? The scale of international migration has substantially increased in recent years and has become a truly global phenomenon, with 281 million people estimated to live outside their country of origin. What's even more interesting is to see where all these people go to live after they've left their home country. And this might come as a surprise to some people. From this map, it is clear that Europe and Asia are the largest destinations for international immigrants. Over 60% of all immigrants relocate and live in these two regions. What is more, Africa is also home to a lot of immigrants, with over 25 million people, most of whom come from other African countries or Asia. Although Latin America and the Caribbean have a relatively small percentage of migrants when compared to other world regions, over the past 15 years, the number of international migrants doubled here, from around 7 million to 15 million people, making our region with the highest growth rate in the world right now when it comes to immigration. But if we look at the countries as such, the United States of America, of course, has more immigrants than any other country in the world. And it has been the case for the last 50 years. Currently, about 51 million people who live in the United States were born in a different country. Just think about it, it's almost 1/6 or 15% of US population. In absolute numbers, Germany and Saudi Arabia follow the US with 16 and 13 million international immigrants. But if you think these countries are the countries of immigrants, what would you say about the United Arab Emirates? You see, it ranks number 6 with 8.5 million foreigners, but these immigrants make up 88% of the whole population of the country. Just imagine that. The number of locals in United Arab Emirates is less than 12%. In fact, top 5 countries with the highest percentage of immigrants in the world are all currently in the Middle East. And here's the question. Have you ever heard the locals from these Gulf countries complaining about foreigners stealing their jobs or, taking over their country? The kind of narrative we sometimes hear from elsewhere. Not the case in the Middle East. In fact, even though foreigners are the majority in these countries, it's actually them and not the locals who are complaining. The situation is so bad that some reports view these foreigners as modern-day indentured servants because they are often mistreated, live in terrible conditions, while being exploited, having to work in unbearable heat for really small salaries. These examples are just to show that the context of foreigners living in a country can vary drastically, and many factors should be taken into account when we look at immigration in Jamaica. One of these important factors to keep in mind is public opinion and our common knowledge, which often has nothing to do with reality, but a lot to do with media coverage, biases, and personal experiences. The easiest way to illustrate this when it comes to Jamaica is to ask a simple question. What do you think is the percentage of immigrants living in Jamaica? 30%? 15% of the population, like in the US, or maybe 5%? We actually know the exact number. 23,629 people. This number is equivalent to 0.8% of Jamaican population. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just showing this as proof that Jamaica happens to be among the countries with the least number of foreign nationals in the world. To be precise, if you look up all countries and territories and the number of immigrants as the percentage of their populations, Jamaica is at the very bottom of this list, and it ranks 195 in the company of such places as Iraq, Western Sahara, Tanzania, and Sierra Leone. There are, of course, countries that rank even lower because they have even less immigrants than Jamaica. For example, Afghanistan or North Korea, or India and China, because the number of immigrants there are just dwarfed by their huge populations. The country with the least number of immigrants in the world is our neighbor, Cuba. And the other neighbor, Haiti, is also at the very bottom of this list. Of course, not all immigrants are labor force. Some are family members on dependent visas, but not all population is labor force either. Some are children, some are elderly. So if we take everything into account, this is the graph that shows the percentage of foreign nationals as Jamaican labor force. It's less than 1%, which means 99% of all jobs in Jamaica are done by Jamaicans. I don't know about you, but this is not what I expected to find when I began doing the research for this video. And honestly, this data messed up my whole storyline because initially the idea behind the video was to investigate why foreigners are given the jobs instead of Jamaicans and how to encourage businesses to hire more locals. But being hit with this data, companies hire locals 99 times out of 100. So I thought maybe I'm suddenly failing to understand the statistics, or maybe there is a mistake or some manipulations. And I also looked at what's happening with other nations and territories nearby. And guess what? They do have a rather high number of immigrants compared to Jamaica, from 4% to over 70% of their populations, unlike Jamaica, Haiti, and Cuba. So is this good news for Jamaica or bad news for Jamaica? I don't know how to react to this situation, so please share your thoughts on this in the comment section below. But another question is, How does it make any sense then? If the number of immigrants in Jamaica is so insignificant, why do Jamaican residents, me included, live under the impression that a lot of jobs are done by foreigners? Basically, this statistics contradicts my eyes. So of course, I went on to search further. But before we continue, I'd like to pause here for a minute to thank our patrons. This video involved a lot of work and it became possible only because of my patrons. These are the people who allow me to focus on the quality of my content without having to worry whether YouTube is going to push the video or not. Because of my patrons and their consistent support, despite me not publishing for 2 months, I'm able to challenge difficult topics, focus on doing some deep research and find creative ways of turning boring statistical data into these exciting real-life stories full of facts supported with evidence. As a result, all this allows to bring value with each video published on this channel. Once again, many thanks to our patrons, and if you'd like to join them and contribute to our project financially, you can do so from only $5 per month. Now back to the video. The statistics you see in this video is very reliable. It comes from 2 reports I studied that were independently done by the United Nations, as well as the data from multiple Jamaican sources. By the way, all the links are in the description, so feel free to check them out if you wish. However, as I mentioned earlier, this statistics only covers legal foreign labor in Jamaica, while there are also companies that are trying to go around these immigration rules. And I'm not going to shy away from this part of the story. For instance, they can bring foreigners who stay in Jamaica for up to 3 or 6 months as tourists, but in fact, they work for these companies without applying for a work permit. Once the time is up, they leave the country and come back for another 3 months or 6 months, again as tourists. Technically, these people are taking the jobs of Jamaicans, but they won't be counted towards these 23,000 plus something immigrants in the statistics. The Jamaican government is obviously aware of this, and that's why if you really are a tourist who visits Jamaica several times a year, or you like to spend your winters here, don't be surprised that an immigration officer at the airport might have some extra questions for you. They're not being rude, but when they see all these arrival stamps in your passport, they're just trying to make sure you're not one of those illegal workers. In the beginning of the video, I also mentioned that for a work permit to be approved, a business owner first has to prove that they cannot find a local person for this position. Some business owners, however, go around these rules with all sorts of manipulations and still bring a foreigner to do a job, even if there is a qualified local person available for it. This happens because, contrary to what some people might believe, Jamaican labor is rather expensive by international standards. Sure, it's cheaper when compared to the US, but compared to China or India or a lot of countries in Asia, Africa, or Eastern Europe, the salaries in Jamaica are higher. A company might bring a housekeeper from the Philippines because they can pay a half of what they would have had to pay to a Jamaican person. And they would have to do it illegally because legally they won't be able to prove that they cannot find a Jamaican to do this job. By the way, this is often the reason why, say, a Chinese construction company is hired instead of a local one. People think it's some discrimination or government arrangement or something, but the reality is rather boring. It's just cheaper because they have access to cheaper labor, to cheaper materials. So for a local company, it's very difficult to compete with something like this. But back to the individuals. The truth is, the number of these illegal workers is tiny. And other countries also have these people, even more so. than Jamaica. So none of these things, including possible illegal immigration or manipulations, explain why there are so few foreigners living in Jamaica while we think the numbers are high. To understand this, let's look at this situation from a different angle. Why do foreigners get top-paid jobs in Jamaica? There is a short and straightforward answer. There are a lot of Jamaicans who are skilled, talented, and experienced, and they can be excellent general managers, leading engineers, exceptional doctors, great lawyers, financiers, and so on. They can do all of these top-paid jobs, and all of these Jamaicans are doing them in the United States or Canada or the United Kingdom. So the short answer is foreigners take top-paid jobs in Jamaica because there are not enough qualified Jamaicans to do these jobs. Well, there are, but these Jamaicans are not in Jamaica. It's not news. Everybody knows about the so-called brain drain, but while doing the research, I realized that hardly anyone is aware of the scale and the consequences of brain drain. While Jamaica is one of the countries with the least number of immigrants, as we have established, it also happens to be one of the countries with the highest number of emigrants. The number of local people leaving Jamaica is one of the highest in the world as the percentage of country's population. This topic is huge and deserves a separate video, which is coming up really soon this time. So if you are not subscribed to the channel yet, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you won't miss the video when it comes out. But yes, it's a fact that a lot of Jamaicans, as soon as they get good education and experience, they leave their home country. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing bad in searching for better opportunities elsewhere. I personally do that too. But the question is, what are the businesses in Jamaica supposed to do? When they can, they of course hire or appoint Jamaicans. Not because they want to support the locals, but because from the business point of view, the costs of bringing somebody from abroad legally is usually higher. And that's why we have 99 times out of 100 locals recruited. But this is a whole labor market. What if we look specifically at high-level jobs? And the problem here is that if we try to find how many leading positions are taken by foreigners or by locals, such official statistics doesn't exist because it's quite impossible to create. Like what would be included in top-level jobs and what not and why. So, to give us some idea of the tendency, I took a random list of 20 big companies in Jamaica and simply looked at their board of directors and top managers and then researched every single one of them to see their country of origin. The overall ratio for these companies on average was 8 top positions out of 10 were taken by people born in Jamaica. This means that the tendency is 80% of all top positions are taken by Jamaicans, while 20% by foreigners. As you see, the Jamaicans are a dominant group here too, but the ratio is very different compared to the whole job market where we have 99% versus 1%. This is one of the reasons that gives us an impression that all high-paid jobs are done by foreigners, because indeed there are more foreigners at high-level jobs than, well, not Jamaicans, but more than there are foreigners on every jobs. Do you see what I mean? This tendency is, of course, because of the brain drain in the country and the lack of highly qualified, skilled professionals among the residents in Jamaica themselves. This, in turn, raises another good question that I sometimes see in social media. If there are no locals qualified for the job, why hire foreigners when there are plenty of skilled and talented members of the Jamaican diaspora? Why not bring them back instead? There is an interesting article I found in the internet written by a member of the Jamaican diaspora called "On This Business of recruiting foreigners, where the author is discussing the issue and saying, quote, "Many persons in the diaspora would happily return home if the opportunity is right." And I'm sure some of my viewers would also agree. But this last part of this phrase is precisely the issue. For the members of the Jamaican diaspora, the opportunity is almost never right. If you look at the Indian diaspora, which is the largest in the world in absolute numbers, you will see that they're spread out all over the world, from the United States to the countries of Africa. The Jamaican diaspora, on the other hand, is heavily concentrated within 3 countries: the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. Sure, there are Jamaicans in many countries, but vast majority are here. These 3 countries also happen to be among the largest economies in the world. So for a member of a Jamaican diaspora, the opportunity is right when the offer in Jamaica can match the offer they have in one of these 3 countries. Maybe the same salary or higher, or less money but more benefits. The companies in Jamaica in most cases cannot afford to provide the same level of earnings as offered here, and that's why if they cannot find the locals, they recruit foreign nationals, because foreigners with the same set of skills and qualifications can be hired for less money than a member of a Jamaican diaspora. But why would a person from North America or Western Europe agree to work in Jamaica for less money than in their home country? They must be getting something extra, some extra opportunity that is never offered to the people of the Jamaican diaspora. And it's true. As a foreigner myself, I know what this thing is, and I'm going to tell you now. It's the opportunity to live in the Caribbean. Let me come to a Jamaican person in Toronto and say, here is an opportunity of a lifetime. Come to live in the Caribbean and I will pay 1/3 of the salary you're earning now in Canada. Chances are, such opportunity is not right. Now let me approach a person who was born in Canada and spent their whole life there. Come to live in the Caribbean so you can wake up to a lot of this and you will not have to pay for it. Even I'm going to pay you 1/3 of your salary if you do some work for me. See the difference? So indeed, the foreigners are offered this privilege, the privilege to live in the Caribbean. Jamaicans are born with this privilege, and they have already spent part of their lives in the Caribbean and chose to leave because of other reasons. So this opportunity is nothing special for them, while for foreigners, being able to live in the Caribbean, it's like a dream. And some are ready to make sacrifices to make this dream come true. To be fair, there aren't that many North Americans and Europeans who do that. And that's why the majority of immigrants in Jamaica are currently not from these regions. They are from China and India, and only then from other Caribbean countries, and then the United States, Mexico, and so on. The last thing I want to mention here is about the foreigners who indeed get all this royal treatment. Not only they have their tickets covered, accommodation paid, sometimes a car is provided to them, and also they get really high salaries. There are cases like these in Jamaica. A good example, a general manager of a hotel that belongs to a large international network. Some people with unique skills, like a famous designer or top chef in a restaurant. They are deliberately headhunted all over the world. And if the company is lucky to get them and bring them here, sure, they're offered all sorts of things. The diplomats are also getting all perks and bonuses. A US ambassador to Jamaica, who happens to be a Jamaican, by the way, born in St. Andrew, I don't think when he came, he was offered to find his relatives and stay with them while being appointed to the job. Of course, he's getting all the, bonuses and perks. Why wouldn't he? So, of course, there are such non-residents who are getting this royal treatment, but it's like a handful of them from already an insignificant number of immigrants. It's just that when we hear the stories about them, we assume that, that must be all foreigners getting that, but they don't. Sure, we can see foreigners who get a job in Jamaica that includes accommodation covered by company and they live in this beautiful 5-bedroom house with a swimming pool. But what we don't see is that accommodation coverage comes straight out of their salary, and they often have just a bedroom in this house, while the other 4 bedrooms are given to other employees from the same company. You see, the accommodation is included in the job not because it's a bonus, but because it's cheaper for a company to do it that way. Again, it's all about business, minimizing the costs, maximizing the profits. Whatever is more profitable for a company, the company is going to do that. To conclude, despite the topic of today's video, I'd like to point out that generally there is no xenophobia in Jamaica. Most of the times the locals are very nice and welcoming regardless of where you come from, your nationality, your status, and so on. Unlike majority of Caribbean nations, Jamaica is among the countries with the least number of immigrants. Majority of these immigrants are either self-employed or take high-level jobs, and in the last 20 years, countries of origins for immigrants in Jamaica are China and India. Very few immigrants in Jamaica are getting a salary that can match propositions in North America or Western Europe, which in turn makes it difficult to recruit the members of Jamaican diaspora who live in those regions. The evidence points that if foreigners are hired at the expense of locals, such occasions are illegal and rather rare. So why do Jamaican residents sometimes believe that foreigners are taking a lot of jobs? There cannot be facts here, just opinions, and my opinion, I think it's because we base this information on media coverage and assumptions we have never tried to check, because they're based on our personal experience or biases. So, of course, all Jamaicans know how beautiful Jamaica is, and I'm sure a lot of people from the Jamaican diaspora want to come back home eventually, but they're waiting for when the opportunity is right. I understand that because I had also been waiting for 15 years for the right opportunity before relocating to Jamaica, and that right opportunity never came. So I stopped waiting and created the opportunity myself. Should more people follow my example and relocate to Jamaica? Well, I don't know. Don't look at me. I'm just presenting the data, and I hope this video has provided valuable information for people considering Jamaica to become their new home, and of course for people in Jamaica and the Jamaican diaspora, so that we can view this whole picture of what's going on in Jamaica in the global context of immigration. Please don't be shy to share your feedback or criticism, if any. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. If you have found this video useful, please don't forget to give it a like and of course share it in social media so more people see it. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, huge thanks to our patrons for their continued support. My name is Irina, and I'll see you in the next video, very soon this time. Stay tuned.